Class is now in session. I'm Professor Hockey, and today we'll be discussing the game between the Sharks and the Canucks, in which the Sharks have finally won for the first time here in a while, and first time at least in December, by the score of 4-2 over the Canucks. Now, the Canucks were a team that defeated them quite handedly earlier on in November, 5-2. That, I said in my previous video, was sort of the turning point for that month of November, where the Sharks went on a roll after that. Hopefully, this win here can act as a similar type of turning point as they take it 4-2, as I said. Now, in the first period, it was once again the Sharks getting off with the first goal. That was Tomas Hertl's 12th of the year. But we saw the Sharks get a first goal in the game against the New York Rangers, and eventually they'd end up losing 6-3. So there was still a lot of work to be done. A big issue for the Sharks, at least during this losing streak, has been playing a full 60 minutes, as in basically almost every single game they've lost during that streak, they've actually had a solid period, and sometimes even a couple of periods, and that was the case here tonight. Their first period was actually quite solid. While I didn't think it was extremely dominant, even though their shot clock might indicate otherwise, I did think they limited the Canucks quite well. Come second period, that began to change a bit. I will say I don't think in the second period the Canucks necessarily dominated, but they again had the advantage there on the shot clock. Eventually, though, we would get to the third period where Timo Meier would make it 2-0 before Virtanen would quickly make it 2-1, so the one-goal game would continue, and eventually, as the goaltender would get pulled for the Canucks, Evander Kane would add an empty net. Horvat would then score in the last 30 seconds to again turn it back into a one-goal game before Couture would finally put it away with the second empty netter. And so, in a game where the Sharks only scored 2 goals on a manned net, it ended up being enough, thanks to 2 empty netters, to win. First thing to talk about would be Aaron Dell, as no surprise really that he would get the start here tonight after the disastrous outing from Martin Jones, and he played actually quite well. He wasn't challenged all that much in the first period, but he made a couple of nice saves in the second. He made a couple of very nice saves in the third period. The Virtanen one wasn't great, but he didn't have much of a chance on the Horvat one, I would say. But all in all, the fact is that Dell let in only 2 goals in this game, and it was enough to get the Sharks the victory. So, I would say I definitely wouldn't be surprised to see him get the game on Tuesday over Martin Jones once more. Next, I will talk about Booner again here in his second game. Has there been some progress necessarily? I guess you could say yes. I think in the offensive zone, we saw some similar things as we saw last game, especially from that Joe Thornton line, I thought, and somewhat from the Logan Couture line as well, although it again is not nearly as consistent as it needs to be. I thought the defensive side was a bit better, so a couple of pretty bad giveaways, mostly from Erik Karlsson in the defensive zone that luckily Dell was able to bail him out of, but more or less it was pretty decent, I guess you could say. I would say it is a step up from the game against the Rangers, but certainly still a lot of kinks to work out. Now, when it comes to the lineup from here, Blickfield was actually kept in the lineup. He again really didn't do all that much at all, so I wonder if he'll then get the following game. Gambrell was subbed out for Noah Gregor. Gregor also didn't really do all that much, so basically the thing is, in this game and the previous game against the Rangers, it's mostly been the Sharks' top 6 that has been pulling a lot of the weight, and the Sharks' bottom 6 has not been fantastic. Next, I will talk about Joe Thornton. As I said, Thornton's line was very good tonight, and I can reiterate that by saying Hertl looked quite strong. LeBanc had a pretty bad penalty, but otherwise was pretty good in the offensive zone. But to speak specifically about Thornton, all in all, over this 35 or so games that the Sharks have played this season, has actually been quite subpar. He has yet to actually score a goal. He's only now, with tonight's assist, at 12 points in those 35 games, which only puts him on pace for around 25 to 30 points on the full year. And so it does seem as though his age has caught up to him. However, Thornton has actually been playing a lot better in these past few games. I think tonight here he was maybe the Sharks' best player, him or potentially Hertl. Maybe there were a couple other options as well, but Thornton looked very, very good. And I thought a good shift that really epitomizes what Thornton is as a player came early in the third period, where we saw this was a 2-on-1 between Thornton and LeBanc, but LeBanc was in nowhere near a good position to actually be able to take a shot. He was near the boards, and Thornton was in a great position to take a shot, and yet he tries to go for this pass to get it across for Labanc, which obviously doesn't work. Eventually, later on this same shift, the puck would go the other way. The Canucks would get a 2-on-1, and Thornton, you could see him put his head down, and he's trying to, build some speed to get back defensively, but I'm sure we all knew, and Thornton himself knew, that he wasn't going to be able to get back here defensively. He's just not fast enough, but yet he still really skates with all of his effort, and he eventually ends up getting back in time after a shot is taken by Tanner Pearson to be able to clear the puck from the front of the net. So just, the reason why Thornton is maybe still at 0 goals this season, but then also just the heart and the effort that he still puts into the game every single day, even here at age 40. Finally, I will talk about Logan Couture. Potentially has been the most consistent Sharks forward. I that would be up in the air. Hurdle has had his up and downs here, especially since his injury. Kane clearly has not been the most consistent. Meyer has looked somewhat better as of late, but you could definitely point to Couture being the most consistent forward. And I think something that is sometimes not talked about enough when it comes to Couture is his defensive game. I realize the Sharks defensively as a whole this year have not been good at all, but Couture still manages to pull his weight most of the time. So a lot of the times when media is talking about who's getting the Selke, and they're talking about the likes of Barkov and Couturier and O'Reilly and all of these defensive centers, Couture is sometimes there in the end, being like a 6th or a 7th place voter, as someone who got maybe a couple of first place votes. But I would like to see Couture get a bit more active in that type of trophy, just because Couture has continuously been not only a pretty solid offensive producer, good for a good 60 to 70 points, which is normally in line what most Selke players get, but also he is consistently getting these top matchups against the other team's top lines. And he normally does a pretty good job, and I thought he did a pretty solid job here tonight. As I said, the Sharks defensively were okay, not perfect, but when Couture was on the ice, it looked pretty solid. But that will do it for this review. The Sharks will be back in action on Tuesday. They will face off once again against the Arizona Coyotes. This is a team that they have beaten earlier this season. This was actually their last win prior to their 6-game losing streak that has now been broken with this one. So they'll look to take it once again against that division rival. Class dismissed.